Hello and welcome back to season 4 of Shallow. We know there has been a longer hiatus between seasons than we are used to. We will explain as to why that is down the line into season 4. But for now, we know you shouldn't pick favourites, but we're going to pick a favourite. One of the favourite episodes we've ever recorded for Shallow. It's an amazing story of an amazing woman. And if you honestly only ever listen to one episode of this podcast, and personally, please don't, please subscribe and everything and listen to more. But let this be it. But before we dive in, we are just changing our episode release structure to every other week for the foreseeable. This might change again, probably will at some stage, but for now it's going to be every other week. But if you want updates, social content, Brucey bonuses, you know where to find us: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, @ShallowPod for all the good stuff. But for now, let's dive in. And it's quite the episode.
Welcome to Shallow. One podcast, 2 time zones, diving deep into a new topic every week. From pop culture to beauty and wellness trends, careers and ambitions, these conversations flood our WhatsApp inboxes and social media feeds. Dialing in from Sydney, Australia and London, UK, we're asking the same question. Is it really that deep?
This week's episode is a little bit different.
Yes, we're chucking the structure out the window. Why? Because the second we started talking to this week's guest, we knew this episode had to be all about her.
You might know her from TikTok or just being an all-round fabulous woman. Trisha Avery, welcome to Shallow again. Someone forgot to hit record. That person was me. How are you?
I am thrilled to be here and delighted that you two were even the slightest bit interested in talking to this old lady. So no, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you very much for asking me.
Oh, no problem. We should probably start with how we discovered you, which was on TikTok. How did you come to be on the app that is associated with dancing teenagers?
That's a great question. In fact, I'll come back to the dancing teenagers in a minute. But how I came to be on it was that I work in executive development as well as work in psychotherapy. And my clients are global, large-scale multinational corporations. And one of them had asked me whether I would perhaps think of starting a private YouTube channel for the company rather than use their internal one, because they wanted to keep it specific to a group of people. And anyway, it was an IT thing. And I said, yes, I'd do that. And I would start it and own it. And I was going to call it the People Whisperer because that's the nickname they have for me, which is cute. But so I was going to do that. And then I was thinking about it and went, oh, I haven't seen myself or videoed myself or had to look at myself on video other than doing, Teams calls and things, which I can just be a thumbnail on for decades. So I went, where can I practice that I'll know nobody? There's TikTok. Mm-hmm. So I posted about, I thought, what can I post about? And I posted about a thing called the Generation Jones. And within two posts, I had 1,000 followers. So TikTok, it's 1,000 followers is the threshold for TikTok to open up the back end for you. Yeah. And so that's what happened. And now this week I tipped over 1.5 million views, and I've got about 25 or 26,000 followers. And I post every day and done over 300 posts, and I'm completely sucked in.
And how do you find the community on TikTok or TikTok as a platform in general? Because obviously it started out as kind of like a dance app, and that was the initial startup for it. So how do you find it coming on as an over 60 and projecting your kind of ideas to them?
It's actually been so easy, because I think that what I did is found a niche. And the niche was that I thought, I'm interested in what it's like to be me and to feel what it's like to be me as an older woman who's always been very aware of being in society. And I wanted to know why older women felt that they weren't visible. So I wanted to do something about that and just talk about it to start with. And because I have a psychotherapeutic background and I work in, professional psychology, it's not hard for me to come up with things to talk about. And anyway, I talk about stuff about just being me. So I just started doing that, and I didn't see a dance. I didn't see a teenager. other than one that happened to be, doing a live that when you doom scroll through and you quickly move through them. So no, I just saw people almost immediately in my niche. So I think it's such a complex platform, actually. When I look at the others that I'm on for my personal things, it's very different. I don't see the complexity. It may be there, but TikTok's obvious. It throws information at you. It wants you to train. It wants to offer you courses. It wants to give you information. And so I found it terribly easy and very serious in a way. Like I was taken seriously.
I love that. And I think working in the social media industry as well, like we're forever telling businesses and brands that actually TikTok is so much more than just dancing teenagers. Like when you find your space and you find your niche, it will give you more of that, and you realize that there's space for almost anything that you're looking for on that app. What's your kind of segment of TikTok look like?
Well, my account's called, it's my name and then Living Loud, and the idea was that I really wanted to say to women over 60 in particular, but women in general who are getting older, probably post-menopause women, to say don't retire. And what I don't mean retire from work, but retire from life. Stay visible, stay present, stay in your skin, stay feeling all the things you've already felt, stay paying attention to who you are in the world, and not allowing people to make you invisible, and not allowing people in shops to ignore you, or whatever that particular thing might be that day that affects them. But I don't mean be aggressive. I don't mean punch someone in the nose for ignoring them or anything, although sometimes you can feel like that. What I meant was to just stand your ground, as you would if you were 25 going into those places. So it was from that point of view that I wanted to talk to women. And literally, as soon as I started doing that, I just got hundreds and hundreds of followers. I hit 10,000 followers very quickly, like within 2 or 3 months. I don't know, when I say quickly, I don't know what to measure it against, because I knew nothing about it. But I did do some training, and I did learn a bit about what it is that I was doing on the platform. I do get a little annoyed with some of the cultures, and I won't, all I'll describe it as it's one over there that's got a president that we all are aware of, because it does dominate from time to time, and my cultural references are more European than that. So some of that language and some of the things they talk about are very different. But other than that, it's been easy, actually. And the amount of people that, talk what you're saying, Lucy, about your clients, I tell my clients, and I tell all my friends who are people, most of my friends are in the arts, because that was my first career. And, they're my long-term friends. And I'm all saying to them, you need to get on TikTok. And they're all terrified. So that there is something about saying that I'm on TikTok to people over sort of 45. They cringe at me. They laugh. They sort of pull faces. Whereas everyone under 45 goes, what? That's brilliant.
Yeah.
How fantastic. And the difference has been extraordinary. It's less so now because I treat it differently. But when I first started, that was that. So that, in terms of, Lucy, in terms of you asking the question about being on TikTok, that was actually one of the biggest hurdles, was for me to manage the cringe factor.
And what's interesting about that is because we found you and your videos, we're late 20s, about to turn 30, kind of that kind of age group. And we found your videos and we thought they were just the most authentic thing we'd seen. Like and you say you're for over 60s, you're for over 70s, for living bravely in your older age. But I think they're so important as well for people of our age and younger to watch, because this is a fate that many women and most women are going to go through, is this. And I really liked how you described how women kind of become invisible. And that is, it's at the back of my mind a lot as well, because I think you see that with like your family members, you see that with people that and they kind of diminish themselves and they become a bit smaller than they are inside. And I think that is a very female trait. And I just think it's really important for people of a different generation to be like, no, you don't have to be like that. You don't have to resign yourself to like hiding who you are, or, not dressing loudly or not, you know, putting colour on yourself. And yeah, I think that's really interesting. I would love you to talk a little bit more about the invisible.
So I think it's actually a feminist principle. For me, it's also about that. I've been a feminist since I understood what it was, which was probably about 15. When I was about 15 years old, and I started reading about first wave feminism. I'm what we call the second wave feminist. So my feminism, my sort of demonstrations, being very involved was in the late 70s. But the thing that I feel about that notion of women wanting to move back, and it is hard when you see it in your family. Look, I should just add here that my mother was not that woman. My mother was loud until she died.
I love that. I love it.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Yes.
So 3 days before my mother died, I flew to Greece for a wedding. And the day before, so 4 days before she died while I was away, unfortunately, I took her out and we went and had lunch at a Spanish restaurant that I love. And then I took her back, and she'd been married 3 times. She married the third husband at 81. But she was a flirt and she was elegant. She had Alzheimer's, but she would still have a Chanel jacket on. She would still wear her mink, which was terribly embarrassing for me to walk around with her wearing mink. But she did. And I just didn't fight it in the end because, if you've got Alzheimer's, let her, is my view. Anyway, as I was dropping her off, she was living in a particular type of unit where they all sat together for dinner. And as I was dropping her off, I watched her go into the dinner. Everyone else was already. And as she walked past this older gentleman, she trailed her hand across his shoulder.
No.
You're 89 years old. You have Alzheimer's, but you've never learned to stop flirting.
Oh my God, I love it. That's who I aspire to be.
I had a role model in my mother, but it is a feminist issue. You see that notion of, and you use the word fate, I think, when you said the younger generations need to see what the fate. It's not that. And I think that is part of the social conditioning, is that we assume, other than the fact that we are closer to not being here than we are here, which has a different psychological connotation and social psychology connotation. But the notion is, as we get older, that it's something to be frightened of. I felt it too. And now I have none of that. It's all gone. And it's not just about TikTok that it's all gone, but I just don't feel that way anymore because I'm in my life. And so my life is now. And what you realize when you get older is that actually my brain could still be at 35 or 25 because those memories are still quite vivid. Well, some are more vivid than others, I should add. But anyway, but I was for one of those people that the 1980s were my 1960s. I remember very little of them. I was living in London.
Well, let's get to that as part of your life, because you lived was it Holland Park for a time? Tell us about that, because you've been all over the globe.
Well, I grew up all over the globe because my father was in the British Army. He was an officer in the British Army, and then he became a diplomat, and that's how we ended up in Australia. So we did live all over the world, and I went to boarding schools. In fact, you know the Antiques Roadshow?
Yeah.
So the last shot of the Antiques Roadshow is the scooter going into a big gate. That's my boarding school.
Stop.
No way.
A boarding school called Tredegar Park in South Wales, which is no longer there. It's now a golf course or something. But that was one of the boarding schools I went to. So I went to a number of schools all over the world, and I forgot the question.
Oh, sorry. Let pre-TikTok.
Not over 60.
I was going to say let's rewind to your time in London, pre-TikTok, pre all of this. What was the? Yeah.
I'm just giving you the history. So I didn't grow up in the UK other than schooling, but I was very attached to the UK. So the first opportunity that I had to go and live in London on my own was I spent a lot of time in London. I did my A-levels in Leicester. And I was very naughty. I would hitchhike with friends down to London, and we would just hang out at all sorts of places we shouldn't, and go to concerts and get into concerts and do all the things we shouldn't do at 15. So I'm not a role model for anybody. Stop it. If this goes out to anyone, don't do it. Very different time, and it was much safer. So I loved London. London had an appeal for me that I couldn't describe. And I'll give you an example of how I was pulled to go back to live in London, or the UK, but particularly London. So I went back to go to drama school in 1979, and I went to a drama school called ALRA, Academy of Life and Recorded Arts, which no longer exists. Glenda Jackson was the patron, and it did exist up until COVID. And then with so many other things, it just couldn't sustain itself. It also was a very expensive building, and all sorts. It ended up being in Battersea. When I was there, it was in Finchley. So that was the first time I went back, and I studied directing and also acting, teaching. And I was living in those days I lived in a squat for a short time, because I think that everyone of my generation, if they didn't live in a squat in London, really shouldn't be part of any cool crowd, quite frankly. But I'm not suggesting anyone lives in a squat, but at that time, it was cool. But I ended up mainly living in West Hampstead, with all of those tiny little studio flats that everybody lived in. All the people that went to drama school living in tiny, tiny little places in West Hampstead. So I spent most of my time there. But then I came back to Australia and had a career in Australia in the entertainment world, including doing things like being part of the group that started the comedy festival here, and also I set up touring circuits in the US for Australian comedians, because I was a comedian at a time. I was a stand-up for a short time, and I had a theatrical agency that looked after comedians. But I just yearned to go back to London. So I sold my business in 1980 something or other, 7, I think it was. And I found myself back in London, and through the British Arts Council, I was asked to become the International Development Director for an African ballet company, a Pan-African ballet company based in Stoke Newington, of all places, called Ajido. In fact, I have a poster of them up on my wall here in my office. And that's the first job I got back. I'd done a lot of producing and shows. And I mean, I had a very stellar career in the 80s. I was an actor in the 70s here in Australia, but I did producing and other things in the 80s. But going back to London, and that's when I bought my flat. So I bought a flat in Holland Park. It was W14, but it was Holland Park. Nice. But as Adina says in Absolutely Fab, it was the £100,000 end of Holland Park. So it was on the border of Shepherd's Bush.
Still Holland Park, though.
It was still Holland Park. Can I tell you, ladies, how much it cost? You'll die when I tell you how much it cost.
Oh, it's going to kill us, isn't it? What was it?
£5,000.
No thanks.
Just sold recently for close to $1 million.
Oh, that makes me want to swear very loudly.
So, and whilst I was doing that, so because I was still in the entertainment world, I started doing things like more commercial events. So I worked with the African Ballet Company, and then I took on an contemporary Indian dancer. And I also worked with this extraordinary company in Leeds called Phoenix, which were the first all-black men's dance company in the UK. And but only for a short time. And then one day at a dinner party, I met somebody, I was invited by someone I went to drama school with, and it was a dinner party, and this producer was sitting next to me and said, "Have you ever produced anything?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I produced quite a lot in Australia." And she said, "Can I have a word?" So she took me, this is a friend of mine's house, she took me into the garden and said, "I'm about to sack him. Would you take on the production direction of the closing ceremony of the Junior Olympics?"
Oh my God.
And I went,
"Yeah,
I do." So I said yes.
Honestly, I never know what tangent you're going to go on, Trisha. It's always, I'm like, you're talking about the first black ballet company, and then you're talking about, becoming. Yeah.
Well, it's similar principles, Lucy.
Yeah.
It's similar principles. Anyway, I did that. He still remained a friend for a short period of time after that. And then I just did big commercial events. So I produced lots of shows in the south of France. I started my own production company, still living in my little flat. And was involved in the first Yugoslav peace talks for John Major, and did the European Heads of Government meeting, because I suddenly became in that sort of more commercial world. And because I was a very experienced person in that field, I got brought in to do things. And I do have some incredibly sad stories about the Yugoslav peace talks. And I had a poem written for me from a indicted war criminal.
Wow.
I only became an indicted war criminal later, but and I won't mention his name because I don't want to trigger anyone who might be watching this. But so it's almost like another private conversation. And then I started I had a company, and we were going to put on all the Christmas parades in London with my brothers. Both my brothers also are producers and events. And then one day I collapsed. And during that whole period of time, from probably the early 80s, I had terrible, terrible, terrible period pains. Terrible, terrible, terrible times. And I self-medicated with party drugs, alcohol, living the high life, buying stuff, everything to not look at the pain I was in. And then one day I couldn't not look at it anymore because I was literally collapsing with pain. By that stage, I'd had 3 or 4 operations, and I got rushed into hospital and was told I needed a radical hysterectomy. So that sort of brought that time in London to an end, because post that hysterectomy, I came back to Australia for a short period of time. I did go back to London again to study, to move careers, but that was that section of time.
And what prompted that hysterectomy? Like, where they obviously went in, you were having all these savage period pains, which I'm sure so many women can relate to, and especially, I mean, now obviously, you know, you go into a doctor's surgery in the year 2025, and so often these pains aren't taken seriously. So I can't imagine maybe how it was if you be round the clock to when you were living in London. How did they get to the stage where we were like, we need to just take this all out? Did you have a diagnosis?
Well, I was actually bizarrely first diagnosed in the 80s by a naturopath.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you have a thing called endometriosis. And I went, oh, what's that? And she then told me, and then I went to see a gynecologist in Australia in the 80s. And during the period of the 80s, I actually had a fallopian tube and an ovary removed. Not at the same time. So I had 2 operations because they kept thinking, we'll take bits.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult because the gynecologist was a man and he wasn't sympathetic. And it was really interesting because I have been not fat my whole life, but I've been a larger woman, and sort of around a size 14 most of the time. And I think that they used that, so they would say things to me. And also I was a wild child, and I mean I did party, and so they would say it's because you're partying, or it's because you're overweight, or whatever it was. And then I would suddenly find nuns got endometriosis.
Yeah, like what, you know, they're not doing this, like, and they're
yeah. Well, I'm not.
Well, we'll see.
And then I found out that an Australian Olympic gold medalist runner had endometriosis, and so I suddenly thought, no, there's something more. So I pushed quite hard, but when I got to London, I was so busy, and that's when I said I was medicating, and I had a boyfriend, and I was, I had a really glamorous life. I was flying to New York, all the stuff that you can imagine comes with being the managing director of a big event company and doing the sort of gigs I've just told you I was doing. And so, I pretended, because women do. Women are so good at pretending and acting and putting up with enormous pain. But I just couldn't. They just got to the point I literally couldn't move. And so that was when I ended up in hospital. And it was pretty horrible. But I can't remember his name, and forgive me for not remembering. But he was the senior teaching professor at St Charlotte's in Chelsea. My operation was done at Hammersmith, which is where I had been treated, and he was they work between all the different hospitals in the NHS, and so he did my operation. But once he had operated on me, his attitude changed, because when they opened me up, they discovered. I can almost feel emotional talking about this, actually. Like it's funny, as I'm talking about it, I'm starting to get emotion in my body. Because when they opened me up, they found that they couldn't find my urethra. And there was actually other parts of my body that the endometriosis had attached to, because it was so severe. And so he was shocked. I became a research case, and which I said I would, because obviously I wanted to help other women. And he changed his attitude. He became very kind and, would check in on me. And then I think I mentioned that last time we spoke that I had there was a women's weekly type magazine, sort of one of the women's magazines you pick up in a supermarket. They came and did a full page spread because of him on me. And I tried to find it, but I think it's in a box somewhere in my storage unit down the road, and I couldn't find it. So, but I know it still exists because I saw it recently. And I hope that I helped that, but I did have a complete breakdown afterwards.
God.
I left my job. Actually, the company that I was the MD of and had founded sacked me. All men, all very wealthy, well-educated, Eton-educated in some cases, and who just didn't understand and couldn't understand why I couldn't turn up at work after 6 weeks after the operation. But emotionally, I was wrecked.
I bet. I'm so frustrated for you, because even now, the level of self-advocacy, you either stumble into a doctor's surgery that gets it, which is rare, or you have to push and push and push, and then to go through all of that and then have a boardroom of men be like, you need to go because of something that was never your problem, never your fault. I mean, even if it was, it makes my blood boil.
And one of them was my brother.
Oh my God.
Who we've talked about it, but I sort of was estranged from my family, or I estranged myself from my family for about 6 to 8 months afterwards, because I couldn't cope, because nobody understood. And I forgive them, because I actually adore my brothers, and the one who was the one that didn't understand, he just couldn't get it. And I get that now. So I took myself back to Australia. I rented out my flat, to 2 ons, and young women with on, so they were the daughters of the lower levels of aristocracy. Let's just put it that way.
Sorry, I thought you were like ONS, not HONS. Right, okay, I'm with you.
And because I knew a couple of ons in my social set, and I remember when I arrived that my upstairs neighbour kept ringing me saying, "You've got to do something about them. Please, can you get an estate agent involved, because they were all having sex on the stairs." They just went wild. They got to London and went wild. I hope that's okay on this.
It's fine.
Oh my God, everything's okay on this. Yeah,
everything goes.
Please don't.
So it took me a little bit of a while to get the right people in, but I came back to Australia and went to a place called Byron Bay for 6 months, which was now become a hippie theme park, but in those days it actually was a very lovely place to go to really find myself and get over. I got very well physically quite quickly, but it was the mental and emotional, because I lost my relationship, but I also lost my fertility. And there was no chance of me having a child. And I thought about adopting, but in those days, it took up to 4 to 5 years to get an adoption done. And you had anything past 30, and I was 36 or 37. So I would have had to adopt an 8 or 9-year-old. So I wasn't going to do that. So that was the hardest thing. But can I tell you now, I love not having children now.
That was going to be my next kind of question, was how those kind of decisions that were made for you, that was something that had to happen, and that was out of your control. And I just want to know how those decisions that were out of your control, how it shaped kind of the rest of your career and up till now, really.
It gave me a drive that I've always been driven, but it gave me a different drive, and that drive was to prove something, because I lost all my feminine parts. that we would assume make you female. And so I did actually, it was really when I got interested in psychology again, and I thought, well, I've got to find out, am I still a woman? And of course I am, very much so. But it was all of that stuff, Lucy. And so what it did is it once I got over the real pain and was able to start thinking, how do I move forward? Things happened very rapidly because I took action. I'm a very action-based person. And so I took action and I started thinking differently and decided, okay, well, I'm going to have an incredible, I mean, I'd already had a pretty good career, and I thought, well, I'm not going to stop. And so I was, some friends of mine owned an event company in Melbourne. I was still in Byron Bay, and they rang me and said, would you come back? Fashion TV was just starting, and they'd been asked to do a big thing on, and I had done some fashion work in London. So I said, oh yeah, I'll come back. And so that was it. I had a gig. So I came back to Melbourne and started working in the event world again. And that's how I got through it. But I love not having children. I feel that's like I should be in a confessional, like, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I'm really thrilled to not have kids.
No, like I want to talk about that a little bit more, because we've just recorded an episode on, having a baby in this economy is so tough. And also we're seeing more women either go it alone or happier single, unmarried. The rule book is, and that path is really changing. And what makes you relieved or so happy that almost that decision kind of ended up being made for you, really? But you look back and you're like, I'm so happy that didn't happen. What's the kind of impetus for that thought?
Actually, it's really interesting as you're saying that, Phoebe, because there was a time that there's a woman on TikTok who's in New Zealand who's got an account which is about women who don't want to have children. I noticed that Abby Chatfield recently has been talking about that in terms of climate change. So what I discovered when I didn't have children, so most of my friends were having children. And so my social life radically changed, and I was excluded. And I think the exclusion was done twofold. One is that people thought it might be painful for her, and the other one was she'll be bored. And neither was particularly true. I wasn't, I didn't feel excluded at any of that, but I did feel hurt because, I'm a joiner. I get terrible FOMO, like, I don't want to do it, but please ask me. But I may actually not turn up, but please ask me anyway.
I think people can relate to that.
Good. Okay. And of course I didn't ever get asked. So there was a period of time, probably 15 years from when I had the hysterectomy through to my mid-40s, that I was very aware of not having children because it affected my social life and it affected the community I was involved in, my cohort. So I think that was painful. I think it's slightly different now because people are talking about the choice of being child-free, whereas at that stage, it was a bit like, oh, poor Trisha. Oh, we know we shouldn't do that because it might trigger her. I'm like, no, darling, I just want to sit and drink champagne and chat to you, really, like we always have. So that was difficult. But once I got past that, the absolute freedom to not, other than a dog, the absolute freedom, and sometimes a partner, the absolute freedom to make my own decisions and go and live wherever I wanted to. And of course, I've been back and forward to the UK. I went and lived in New York for a short period of time. I've spent time in other places, and that freedom only came because I didn't have children. And the career I continued to have was because I didn't have children. Because you can't have it all and bring up children. You can't. I just don't believe that. I mean, I'd like to believe it as a feminist principle, but unless you've got a great infrastructure, my mother actually was a terrible mother because she was an orphan and never had a parent. And so she didn't know how to parent. But when I said she was an adorable mother, but when I said she was an orphan mother, she didn't understand how to parent. But I was the eldest daughter, so she was damn lucky because I knew how to parent, and we all grew up very quickly. But I also recognized that that could happen in different ways. So I parented a lot of people. I just could let them go. They didn't have to come and live in my house.
Which sounds like a win-win.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it's so interesting. Because obviously, now, as you say, it's almost, the child-free by choice. Some may not be by choice, but it's becoming more of a societally acceptable path, I guess. And, as you say, with Abby Chatfield mentioning the environment, that's on my mind an awful lot as well, of like, what world are we potentially bringing kids into? Because it's a rough climate, actually climate, and also political and social climate as well. So hearing you talk about, just in blunt terms, being like, I just don't think women can have it all, that's just not a sentiment that is fed to us. I feel like it's, you can do everything, and it's like, can you?
Well, you could, but you may not be psychologically safe.
Yeah, and also you become I feel like you would become resentful. I think of myself in a position that I'm now, which my career's going well. I'm very busy all the time. I've got a big social life. I see a lot of people. I also take care of myself. I exercise. I'm quite healthy. And all those things consume all of my time, completely. And I cannot imagine bringing a child into that situation. And obviously, things might change, but I think in my head, things would have to radically change. And in terms of I would have to do a lot less. I would have to sacrifice, parts of my job and the money that's coming in to maybe live somewhere else that's bigger to accommodate that child. And then I think, well, what is that child going to bring me? Do I actually want that? Or is that just something that I've been told that I want, And it's that kind of battle of is this my biological clock talking in my head, or is this actually how I feel? It's for me, it's that consistent battle. And I mean, I think most people who want children are thinking about it, now, early 30s, late 30s. I still don't see that trajectory for me. I still don't see, maybe in 5 years, I remember being 19 and being I'll probably have a child when I'm 25. I had absolutely no clue. And now, and I think obviously the age is just being pushed and pushed. And who knows, really? And I think it's inspiring,
I think that's fascinating to me. And the reason I'm so fascinated by it is that language, the language that you're both talking, the way that you're describing your internal world around that was not language I heard when I was your age.
Yeah.
It wasn't that we didn't talk about having children, it was just accepted we would.
Yeah, it was a when, not an if.
That's right. Right. So I love it. It fills me with joy to find that at least in that sort of, last 30 plus years, that has that, not just your internal dialogue, but the external version of that internal dialogue is not just able to be discussed, but is accepted as something which is becoming a new norm. The thing I would say, though, is that from a social psychology point of view, there comes a time in women biologically where there does have a yearning, and it is so hard to describe until you experience it. And I did have that, and unfortunately, I got that a year before my hysterectomy. So that was probably why it was so devastating for me. And I remember it vividly, the feeling. So, some people don't go through that, but most women do.
I have heard that a lady who I work with, who is fabulous, was never wanted them, woke up at 35, wanted a baby. That's had 2 kids, and they're incredible. And it was the first time that had actually been introduced to me as this kind of hormonal, emotional, we're kind of this overwhelming sense of I need to do this and fulfill this. So having that taken away is,
I think that language as well is kind of interesting, because it's always the language of, but just wait, you will want one. And yes, that is true. But I also think that women are taught not to be selfish as well. They're not supposed to put themselves first. you're supposed to be selfless, you're supposed to be a nurturer, a carer, you're the person that's looking after everyone. And that's the role for women, right? And I sometimes look at it, well, why can a man be selfish and, you know, be 45 and child free and then just suddenly be like, oh yeah, I might have a kid when I'm 50. You know, we don't have that choice. So therefore I'm going to be selfish until I'm not, you know, like I'm going to do that.
I think that's really appropriate. I think it's completely appropriate for 2025 for this generation that you're both in, and for my nieces, some of whom have kids and some don't. And I think that the power that you're taking back, again, thrills me, because I was unable to, but that's why I knew I was a feminist early on, was because I knew that was something important. So I'm delighted to hear it. And whether you have children or not, it doesn't matter, because honestly, the life I've had, I honestly could not have lived it. And I'm happy. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Absolutely.
Yes, and to continue to have. So I think that is something also to think about, is that the joy of having a really full life. And there are some people that will say having a child is the most important thing women can do. No, it's one of the important things women can do. It's not the most. The most important thing a woman can do is be inside that woman and do what that woman wants.
God, I love that. I love that. And I just, listening to you talk about your life, it's so rich. It's such a tapestry. The experiences you've had are so incredible. They're so inspirational. And not at one point, I guess I'm speaking selfishly from you talking not in your own body, but not at one point was I like, oh God, shame she didn't have a baby. But like, yeah, exactly. But that's not to say that like it wasn't awful that was taken away from you. That sounded like a truly, truly horrific time in your life.
You have a complete breakdown. There's no doubt. And that breakdown was partly because that control had been taken away from me, or the choice.
I know your kind of niche on TikTok is living loud, over 60s, but as Lucy mentioned at the top of the episode, you know, we found the advice you were giving and just the way you were talking so applicable to us and our life that I'm going to try and wrap up with a two-pronged question. In this kind of chaotic, challenging, difficult time we're living in, what advice would you give to someone, a bit of a younger woman and a slightly more mature woman, if you had some sage wisdom to give?
Oh, I've always got sage wisdom.
Always.
I give the advice that I give my goddaughter, who's 36, 37, continually, and that is always make your own choices. Don't allow a relationship, even if, once the pheromones are finished, right? Make your own choices. I don't mean be nasty or kick somebody out. I'm not talking about that. But whatever you're doing, you've got to remember you have agency. You've got to remember that you are the only thing in your body in terms of decision making, in terms of how you want to be in the world and how you want to carry yourself and how you want. And when you think about who's gazing at you, also think about that you're gazing out at them and what is it you want to interpret that as. Because I think we forget, and we're always thinking that there's another gaze on us, but we forget that we have our own gaze, which is very dynamic in us. And I would say the same thing for an older person. The only thing I would add for a younger person is to say that don't be frightened of getting older, because it is, I know it's scary because so much changes in your bodies, and it does. And so much changes in your skin, it does. But what happens is the wisdom you gain, the lived experience you gain is just so empowering that there's a joy just in that. And also always dress how you want. That's another thing I say to everyone. Never let anyone tell you how to dress. And for an older person, it's almost the same, except the difference would be is to not allow people to treat you in a different way than they did when you were 30. And this whole notion that we're all about the male gaze, even, all women, whether they're straight, gay, or trans, or whatever, or whatever they might be, that it's always about the opposite gaze, well, particularly women, male gaze on women. Once you get past that and realize it's great for flirting, like flirt a lot. Flirting is important. Always flirt a lot. And it's great to have a male gaze, but that is not what will sustain you. It's your female that will sustain you.
The highest form of flattery is when a woman will tell you that you look good. You know, a guy can come up and say to you, oh, you look great. Yeah, but you think everyone looks great. Who cares what you think? You don't know about style or fashion. But like if a woman comes and says, you look great, and you do dress for women. You dress for women, you dress yeah, you do.
So yesterday we had a grand final here yesterday, and I went to a pub with a friend of mine, and we were sitting at a table, and this young woman came past and stopped at the table and said to me, oh my God, you look amazing. Your hair's great. You're whatever, you know, all of these things, like compliment after compliment. And I freaked out because A, it was unexpected, but B, that was my post today. I did a post about doing a mini audit on myself, because what I realized was I still had a belief that I wasn't somebody that people would stop and say that to as an older woman. And I had to dig deep today and go, that's another thing. And my friend who I was with said, oh yes, that, you know, that's maybe true. Like, wasn't saying it wasn't true, but it was a younger woman. I mean, in her 20s. And she was effusive. So it was a very salutary lesson, because I went, oh, I've still got something in me that thinks it's a social norm. So I learned something about myself yesterday for that female gaze thing that you're just talking about, Lucy.
God, I love that. Thank you so much for your time. Like, you're so generous with what you're willing to share. And like when you were giving the advice, I was like trying not to cry.
Honestly,
you're just such a legend. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a complete pleasure. You don't know how delighted I am that you asked me. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to Shallow. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave us a review. It makes a really huge difference in helping others discover the podcast. We always want to hear from you, so feel free to slide into our DMs, send us a bell, or follow us on Instagram at ShallowPod. Shallow is a boxed off production, written and hosted by Lucy Bell and Phoebe Whittle. We'll see you next time.